Let's look at the players or the clubs that you think are doing well so far, like a surprise for you, club or player. Who have you got as your sort of biggest standout in a good way?
Coming from Arsenal, I think it was a big signing for Fulham. Emile Smith Rowe, I think since he's gone there, his contribution has been outstanding, and he's built a really good relationship with that and it's great to see him enjoying his football again. I don't think it's a surprise as such because we know the talent that he is, but it's more of a reminder. I think he's given this reminder of how good he can be at times, and it's great to see him as he's one of their talisman at the moment. So I think that's 4 goals as well so far, and 5 contributions I think so far this season. So yeah, it's great to see.
Before we move on to your pick, Miles, let's look at Smith Rowe quickly, because I think one of the last times I chatted to you on the pod was with Isaac, Arsenal fan Isaac, who was kind of looking at Fulham and their ex-Arsenal players and them doing so well with a bit of pride. And Smith Rowe had a lot of pressure on his shoulders, didn't he, with that price tag? It's their record signing after all, but I'm surprised really at how quickly he's hit the ground running. Are you?
It was always going to be the case that in a team where he was expected to be the talisman and have a bit more focus on him, he would have the freedom to lead it a bit more, and he was never going to get that at Arsenal. So seeing him kind of take that opportunity with both hands at Fulham is amazing. It's the irony is, looking at the last few games when Odegaard's been out injured, Arsenal could have really done with him, and he would have fitted in really well into that squad. So hopefully it gives him a real boost in his career. And actually, he's one that I'm surprised that Carsley didn't look at a bit more, because he was looking at trying to bring a lot of young players through. And Smith Rowe's been there or thereabouts before and is in good form. So I thought maybe he might be one that got a look in. But that will come, I think, if he keeps going the way he's been.
Who's on your list then, mate, as the biggest surprise in a positive way? Is it a club or is it a player?
It's a club with a combination of players. I think Brentford, really. I think the way that they've performed so far. Okay, they're 11th in the league, which might be par for the course for them. But I think we all kind of anticipate a bit of a drop-off with Ivan Toney moving on. And actually, the league positions all feel a bit false right now, don't they? Because it's so congested. But their performance has been fantastic. They've been really, really good going forward. A bit more shaky at the back. But they're being incredibly well led by Wissa and Mbeumo, who are filling in for Tony's goals incredibly well. Wissa's already on 7 goals this season, and Mbeumo's on 8. Now, he's only ever... His highest goal scoring season ever, and Mbeumo, was in League 2 in France, and he got 10. So he's already on track to smash that out of the water. I think Ivan Toney got 20 Premier League goals in one season, and that's Brentford's record. He could go on and beat that as well, the way that he's playing. But the two of them, the connection they seem to have, the fact that they're just willing to keep making that step up and show up in those moments when Brentford really need them, I think it's outstanding. And Thomas Frank is someone that I think we've always talked about as whether we expect him to kind of move on to someone else after Brentford, look for that next step up. But instead, it seems like he's desperate to try and take Brentford to the next step himself rather than look for it at another club. And the way they've been going this season, how congested that area of the league is and how difficult it seems to be for anyone to get a run of form together, he could surprise people. They could sneak into a European place, and it wouldn't necessarily be down to anything other than that attacking prowess that they've got.
Yeah, big surprise, because I think we both said they were borderline relegation candidates, dare I say. Like if things didn't go their way, they could slide quite quickly, especially without Toney. But those fears have been allayed a bit quite comfortably with goals especially. But Dave, Brentford, you've always been kind of a big fan of Thomas Frank, haven't you? And I think we've said on a few times on this pod, especially last week, we were saying about that block of teams that are from sort of 3rd down to 13th. Brentford are kind of amongst that now, aren't they, in some ways? And you could see them either climbing up to Europe or getting drawn into relegation, depending on how the league goes. But they've got such a solid foundation, Brentford. Apart from the players that Miles mentioned, is there anyone else stood out for you for them, or is it just a case of them being greater than the sum of their parts?
I agree. I think Wissa's definitely one it's probably taken a lot of people by surprise. I think of how well he's been able to contribute in terms of his numbers. I think I saw something the other day that if you take penalties out of the equation, I think he's actually had as many goals or a similar sort of contribution to what Ivan Toney has had in the past, because we know how many penalties Ivan Toney's had. So I think that's quite impressive in itself. It shows that he's there that he can obviously he can finish. He's that kind of player. I think he's got that kind of nasty streak to him, hasn't he? And I think you'd hate to face him as a defender because he just puts himself about a bit.
Oh, he's tenacious.
He's so committed. But yeah, he's really actually, I think, coming on. I think even more this season. I think it's great to see him actually come into to the limelight and out of those shadows a little bit.
I think you've just talked, both of you, about clubs and players that are outside of the top six, traditional top six as well, which is great. And I'm going to continue that trend as well with my pick for sort of biggest surprise, and that's Chris Wood. And this is in a team in Nottingham Forest who, I mean, we have to talk about them on this pod, don't we? We've got so many sort of listeners that are Forest fans, but to give them their dues, they deserve it this season, that for the right reasons. The whole of the last couple of seasons has been so up and down for them. And I never in a million years thought Chris Wood would be spearheading this attack. But he is the focal point for a group of very talented attacking players in Forest's lineup, isn't he? And somehow scoring goals in ways that I didn't expect him to score goals in, because he's such a tall, kind of burly player, isn't he? That you don't sort of expect him to score some of the finishes that he's been producing. But his finishing's got so much better this season. 8 goals in 11 games so far, Miles. We've heard about what Dave thinks about Chris Wood in previous pods, but since you've been away, what have you thought about his performances for Forest?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you say he's not the player we expected to be spearheading this attack. We've seen Forest bring in a lot of different forwards over the last couple of years. We know about the talent that they've got in the wings. They obviously brought in a Wanye, and his fitness has been a bit of an issue. And Chris Wood's just stepped up massively. And I think it's come at a really good time for him in his career. It felt like it was kind of petering out a little bit when Newcastle signed him. That was seen more of that was a transaction to stop Burnley from having him rather than to integrate him into their team more.
Yeah.
And Forest have really capitalised on that and found a player that was available that is a proven goal scorer. Like he knows where the goal is. He's a great finisher. I mean, he's got an international duty and scored again for New Zealand as well. So he's keeping that up really well. And Forest as a whole, they've just been fantastic. It's not a false position based on their performances at all. They look like they're dominating games. They're playing incredibly well. There's a lot of players in that squad you could have picked out. I mean, Alex Moreno that's gone on loan from Villa, he's been fantastic for him at left back. And looking at that squad and how it's building up now, yeah, Forest look like they should be able to sustain a good competitive season in the Premier League again now.
I guess the question is, can Chris Wood sustain the form he's shown before this international break, Dave? And I think that's the fear, isn't it? Forest have almost become quite dependent on his goals and his contributions. That would Wanye have the same impact as he had before Wood came back into the side? But I think on current evidence, he's got the experience definitely to kind of stay at that level, hasn't he?
Because I think, especially at the end of last season, he did get a little bit of stick for some gilt-edge opportunities that he did miss that actually... fortunately, it didn't obviously come back to haunt Forest and the position they were in last year. But yeah, is it any coincidence having absolutely fabulous season? Danny Welbeck being one of them.
Yeah.
Raul Jimenez, who saw him coming back to his Fulham team, starting after Muniz obviously had the end to the season needed last year. He's forced himself back in and done extremely well the last few weeks. And Chris Wood, I think the experience that these players have. Clearly, I think it's guiding some of the younger players. And I mentioned those 3 teams there, teams full of youth and inexperience. I think it really does help them having that, them spearheading the attack and just having that kind of experience to score the goals.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because you say these players, these over 30s are coming back into not to fashion, but into form. But I think the number 9, generally, the focal point is coming back into fashion too quite a lot, isn't it? You've seen a few clubs reliant on that to finish off their chances, players cutting in from the wings and looking for a player in the middle. I think Arsenal is still yet to fully solve that problem, even though Havertz has been good at it. Haaland is now more in demand for City than he's ever been. If you take him out of the equation for City, where would they be this season? So yeah, Wood's kind of the poster boy of the number 9 and the finisher. Who'd have thought?